I'm Alex, 21 years old. Just a few months back, I truly believed I had my whole future mapped out. I'd gotten into one of the country's top business programs, a goal I'd been chasing since I was 14. My acceptance letter was proudly displayed in my room. The only thing keeping me from stressing about tuition was the college fund my grandparents had set aside for me before they passed. It had been growing with interest since I was little, and my parents always told me, "Don't worry, Alex. This money is for your education. Your future is what matters most." Looking back, I should have realized their promises were as fragile as tissue paper. You see, my younger brother, Ryan, always seemed to be the favorite. It's not because he earned it, but because my parents decided he was the golden child before he could even walk. He was the first to get a phone, the first to get a car, the first to be allowed out late with friends. Each time my parents would rave, "He's just so responsible." Meanwhile, I was constantly having to prove I deserved anything, which usually meant working part-time jobs for things Ryan received without a second thought. The real issues began after I got into my dream school. I noticed my parents acting shifty, whispering in the kitchen when I entered, hiding their phones when I sat nearby. Ryan, on the other hand, was practically buzzing with excitement over something he couldn't reveal yet. I didn't connect the dots then. I thought maybe they were planning some kind of surprise party before I left for college. The truth hit me hard the night Ryan turned 18. We were at the dinner table when my dad slid an envelope across to him with a smug smile. "It's from all of us," he announced. Ryan tore it open, and inside were shiny keys with a Porsche logo. I just stared. My parents never had that kind of cash just sitting around. Every major purchase in our family was meticulously planned months in advance. How? How did you guys even afford this? Started to ask, but my mom cut me off with a falsely sweet voice. "Oh, we just shifted some things around. You'll understand." Not until my dad leaned back in his chair and said, almost as a joke, "Considered a gift to the golden child." Ryan burst out laughing. My mom chuckled too. Something inside me sank. I didn't want to believe it, but I had to ask, "You didn't touch my college fund, did you?" Silence. Then my mom sighed, in that don't be so dramatic way she has. "Alex, honey, you're smart. You'll get scholarships. Besides, it's all in the family, and Ryan needed a good start in life too." I was speechless for a moment. All those years of being told that money was solely for my education, all those times they made me feel guilty for even small requests, and now it was just gone. I excused myself from the table, my hands shaking, and went upstairs before I said something I couldn't take back. That night, I lay in bed replaying every moment I'd gone above and beyond to earn their respect. Every chore, every part-time job, every time I bit my tongue when Ryan was handed something I'd worked for. The betrayal wasn't just about the money. It was about the fact that they didn't even see what they did as wrong. In their minds, Ryan deserved it, and I'd just figure something out. The next morning, my mom acted like nothing had happened. She made pancakes, chatted about the weather, and asked if I'd started packing for college yet. I barely spoke a word. Inside, though, I was furious. I wasn't just going to let this slide, but I also knew I had to be strategic. If they could smile while stealing my future, then I could smile while planning something they'd never see coming. The first step was to keep my cool, pretend I'd accepted it, that I'd moved on. For a while I played the part, but in the back of my mind, the plan was already forming. Then, one small mistake from Ryan gave me the perfect opportunity. It happened. About 2 weeks after the Porsche incident, Ryan sauntered into the kitchen one morning, jingling his keys like they were part of his personality, and casually announced he was skipping his new part-time job because why bother? My parents didn't scold him. Instead, my dad chuckled and said, "You'll have a real job soon enough. Just focus on enjoying life right now." Meanwhile, I was working double shifts at the cafe, trying to scrape together every penny before leaving for school. I hadn't even gotten my first tuition bill yet, but I could already see the numbers piling up against me like bricks. And every time I saw Ryan's shiny new car sitting in the driveway, spotless and perfect, it felt like one of those bricks landed directly on my chest. The favoritism didn't stop with the car. My mom had started casually referring to my room as storage. telling me that once I was gone, they could finally use the space for something useful. She even showed Ryan a paint sample book telling him he could pick the color for his new game room. This was my room. It's the one I'd grown up in, decorated myself, filled with the few things I actually owned. They were planning to gut it before I'd even left. The worst part was, they started using me as an example of what Ryan shouldn't have to endure. "See, Ryan," my dad would say, while I was hunched over my laptop, applying for scholarships late at night, "this is why we help you now, so you don't end up stressing yourself out like your brother." I can't even describe how infuriating it was. To be painted as some cautionary tale in my own home, I was the one trying to be responsible, the one they should have been proud of. Instead, they used my hard work as proof that they'd made the right choice, giving Ryan everything. One Saturday afternoon, I overheard my parents in the living room. My mom was saying, "We'll have to help Ryan with insurance soon. It's expensive." "For young drivers, you know," my dad replied. "Yeah, maybe Alex can chip in once he gets his first loan payout. He'll understand." I froze in the hallway. Not only had they drained my college fund without permission, but now they were already planning to dip into any financial aid. I managed to get money I'd need just to survive at school to help cover Ryan's luxury car expenses. The rage was starting to overpower the hurt. I stopped eating dinner with them, claiming I was busy with work or studying. I made a point of locking my bedroom door whenever I wasn't in it, even though my mom complained it was paranoid and disrespectful. Ryan, of course, took my withdrawal as an opportunity to flaunt things even more. He'd revved the engine of his Porsche in the driveway, grinning at me through the window. One evening, he leaned against the hood while I was unloading groceries and said, "You know, I should thank you. If you weren't so boring, Mom and Dad wouldn't have felt the need to give me something exciting." I remember gripping the grocery bag so hard the handle snapped. I didn't say a word, just walked past him because deep down I knew my silence unnerved him more than anything I could have said. There was one thing I did say a few days later when my dad made another comment about me pulling my weight at home before I left. I smiled genuinely for the first time in weeks and told him, "Don't worry. I'm going to take care of everything before I go." They didn't realize I meant it in a way they'd never forget. And then Ryan left his laptop open on the kitchen table, and I saw something that made the pieces of my plan fall perfectly into place. It was a Tuesday evening, the kind where the air feels heavy and the house is too quiet. Ryan had just come back from another night out, tossing his jacket over a chair and leaving his laptop open on the kitchen table while he raided the fridge. I was heading upstairs when I noticed the screen. At first, I wasn't planning to snoop. I was too tired. But then a word caught my eye. Transfer confirmation. Curiosity got the better of me. I stepped closer, glancing over my shoulder to make sure Ryan was still rummaging through the fridge. The email was from the bank, my bank, or at least the one that had once held my college fund. It took me a moment to process what I was seeing. The transfer wasn't for the Porsche. That money was long gone. No, this was a brand new withdrawal from an account I didn't even realize still had anything left in a small investment account. My grandparents had also left me, separate from the college fund. It wasn't much, just under $8,000, but it was mine. Showed that the funds had been moved into my parents' joint account just 2 days ago. In the memo field, gift for Ryan, private. My stomach dropped so fast I had to grip the edge of the table. I'd never given anyone permission to touch that account. My parents weren't even supposed to have access. And yet here it was, in black, in white. They'd taken the last bit of money my grandparents had intended for me. I scrolled through the email chain and found one from my mom to Ryan, sent the day before. "Don't mention this to Alex. He'll understand later. Just make sure you enjoy it. You deserve it after all the hard work you've done." I nearly laughed out loud. Hard work. This was the same kid who'd quit his job after 2 weeks because waking up early was bad for his mental health. I quietly closed the laptop, my hands ice cold, but my mind racing. They'd already drained my college fund, and now they were taking everything else they could find. And the worst part, they weren't even ashamed. They genuinely believed they were in the right, that this was fair because Ryan was somehow more deserving. That night, I stayed in my room with the lights off, staring at the ceiling. I thought about my grandparents, how careful they'd been. To set money aside for me, how much they'd talked about wanting me to go far. I thought about every holiday where my parents gushed over Ryan's mediocre achievements while acting like my straight A's were just expected. And now they'd turned their favoritism into outright theft. Something inside me snapped. This wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about respect, about principle, about the fact that they had taken and taken from me without ever thinking I might one day push back. The next morning, my mom breezed into my room without knocking, holding a brochure for a European summer. Experience Ryan was considering before he really settled into adult life. When I didn't respond, she added, "Oh, and don't worry about your school stuff. If we need to move things around to help him, we will. You're young. You'll bounce back." I smiled. It wasn't forced this time. It was the kind of smile that hides a storm, because in that moment, I knew exactly how I was going to make them regret underestimating me. And the first step was already sitting in my inbox, waiting to be used. The following weeks felt like walking through a slow-motion nightmare. Every day was another reminder that my parents had no intention of making things right. If anything, they doubled down. The tuition invoice from my university arrived, crisp and official, and I remember holding it at the kitchen table while my mom poured herself coffee. She didn't even look up when I said, "It's due in 3 weeks." She just sipped and said, "You're resourceful, Alex. You'll figure it out." I wanted to tell her about the hours I'd spent on scholarship applications, the sleepless nights filling out FAFSA forms, the way I'd been calculating every dollar I earned from the cafe to see if it could cover even one semester. But I didn't, because by then I'd realized my words didn't matter to them. Only actions would. Still, the reality of my situation was suffocating. Without my college fund or that investment account, my savings could barely cover books and living expenses, let alone tuition. My acceptance to the business program, the thing I'd worked toward for years, suddenly felt like a cruel joke. I started waking up before my alarm, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the fact that I might have to give it up before it even began. Ryan, oblivious as ever, kept flaunting his new toys. One afternoon, he pulled into the driveway with a brand new sound system blasting music so loud the windows rattled. "Mom said I could use some of that other money for upgrades," he shouted over the bass, grinning at me like this was all some fun competition. It was the first time I realized I wasn't just angry, I was done. Done trying to be the bigger person. Done hoping they'd treat me fairly if I just worked harder. Done being the responsible one while they bled me dry. But walking away wasn't as simple as packing a bag. Still needed a roof over my head until I figured out my next step, so I kept my head down. I started picking up extra shifts at the cafe, volunteering to cover closing shifts because it meant I could avoid dinner at home. I stopped answering most of Ryan's smug comments and began responding to my parents with polite, neutral phrases. It wasn't defeat. It was camouflage. In the evenings, I'd sit at my desk with my laptop, combing through bank statements and old files my grandparents had left me. Somewhere in there I knew was a thread I could pull, that they'd taken from me, under the assumption that I was powerless, that I didn't have the resources, the knowledge, or the will to push back. But I had something they didn't count on: patience. And one night, just past midnight, I found exactly what I'd been looking for. It was buried in an old folder labeled for Alex. It was small, but it was enough to start. Inside that folder was a scanned copy of a letter from my grandparents' lawyer dated years ago. It detailed the accounts they had set up for me. It's not just the college fund and the investment account, but something I'd never heard about. A trust, a separate, legally protected account that couldn't be touched until I turned 21. It was designed to ensure Alex's educational and personal independence. And the kicker? My parents weren't trustees. The only person who could authorize any withdrawals was me, once I hit the age requirement. I sat there in the glow of my laptop, rereading the letter, my heart racing. My 21st birthday was less than 3 months away. The trust balance wasn't listed, but if my grandparents had put it in the same hands that managed their own assets, it could be significant. Maybe not millions, but enough to be the foundation I needed. For the first time in weeks, I slept peacefully. From that point forward, my attitude shifted. I didn't confront my parents, didn't demand explanations. I smiled more, nodded along to their conversations. Even asked Ryan about his ridiculous car upgrades like I actually cared because I knew something they didn't. That in a matter of weeks, their entire perception of me was going to change. Meanwhile, I threw myself into preparation. I took on more cafe shifts and funneled every dollar into a separate account they didn't know existed. I also started networking, reaching out to old teachers, mentors, and even a professor from my upcoming program. I vaguely told them I might need alternative options for housing and work near campus. Most of them were sympathetic, offering leads, or even spare rooms if it came to that. With every passing day, I felt more in control. Even my body reacted differently. The constant knot in my stomach loosened. My shoulders felt lighter. I realized I wasn't trapped anymore. I was biding my time. And then something unexpected happened. An opportunity practically fell into my lap. A regular at the cafe overheard me talking to a coworker about my major and mentioned he owned a small marketing firm. He needed an intern. Paid flexible hours. Real-world experience. I applied that night and got the job within a week. That paycheck was nothing compared to what I suspected the trust might hold, but it was symbolic. It meant I was no longer dependent on my parents for anything. And with that independence came the freedom to plan my next moves without fear of them pulling the rug out from under me. Every time Ryan bragged about his weekend trips, or my parents dropped another comment about helping him find his path, I'd just smile and sip my coffee because the countdown had started. And then one afternoon, while checking my email, I saw a message from the trust's managing attorney confirming an appointment for my birthday. It was time to turn quiet patience into action. And when I found out just how much my grandparents had left me, I realized I could do far more than just protect myself. I could make sure my parents and Ryan never forgot what they'd done. The meeting with the trust attorney was in a sleek downtown office, the kind of place with glass walls and that faint smell of expensive paper. I'd half expected some modest sum enough to cover tuition and maybe a few living expenses. But when the attorney slid the statement across the desk, I had to stop myself from visibly reacting. My grandparents had left me just over $180,000. It wasn't quit life forever money, but it was more than enough to pay for school, secure my independence, and most importantly, execute the kind of revenge that didn't just sting, but left a permanent mark. The attorney explained that as of my birthday, I had full control. No one else could access it. My parents didn't even know it existed. As I walked out of that building, the fall air sharp against my face, the plan began crystallizing. This wasn't. It's just going to be about cutting them off. It would be too simple. This was going to be about letting them think they were still in control, still holding the upper hand, right up until the moment it was ripped away. Step one was appearances. Went home that afternoon acting lighter, even cheerful. I thanked my parents for everything they'd done for me and told them I was feeling optimistic about the future. They ate it up. My mom even said, "See, I told you you'd bounce back." Ryan smirked like he'd won some invisible competition. Meanwhile, I quietly started moving pieces into place. I rented a small apartment near campus under my own name, paying the first 6 months in advance so there'd be no risk of anyone interfering. I bought a modest used car, nothing flashy, but reliable, and had it registered to my new address. I even set up an entirely new bank account at a different institution for my tuition payments, all funded from the trust. The more I separated my life from theirs, the more dangerous my position became for them, because they still assumed I'd be dependent on them for something, and I intended to use that assumption against them. The real breakthrough came when I overheard Ryan bragging to one of his friends in the driveway. "Yeah, Mom and Dad are covering my insurance and gas for now, but Alex is getting all this loan money for school. They're going to use some of it to keep my upgrades going. Doesn't even know yet." I almost laughed. I thought they'd be able to siphon off my financial aid. They had no idea that the aid was minimal because the trust covered my expenses outright. And when they tried to arrange things later, they'd find themselves staring into a void where their easy handouts used to be. One last thing fell into my lap when my cafe boss, who I'd been upfront with about my home situation, offered me a small side gig helping with their bookkeeping. It wasn't just extra money. It gave me an excuse to spend even less time at home. It taught me a few tricks about tracking and documenting financial activity tricks I knew I could use. By the time the first tuition bill was due, I had all the leverage I needed: financial independence, a secure place to live, and knowledge of exactly how my parents and Ryan had manipulated the system to drain my accounts. All I needed was the right moment to pull the pin. And that moment came sooner than I expected, delivered by my parents themselves, with an entitled request that made my blood run cold and my smile widen. It was a Sunday morning, the kind where the house smelled faintly of coffee, and my parents were in unusually good moods. I'd just come back from an early shift at the cafe when my dad called me into the living room. Ryan was there too, lounging on the couch, scrolling his phone. "Alex," my mom began, her tone syrupy, in that way she used when she was about to say something unreasonable but wanted it to sound like a favor. "We've been talking, and we need your help with something important." I didn't sit. I just leaned against the doorway, letting her continue. "It's about Ryan's car insurance. The premiums are ridiculous, and with gas prices, ... She trailed off, gesturing vaguely, as if that alone explained why I should care. "We know you're getting that loan. Money soon. And since we're already covering so much for him, we thought you could chip in a little, just until he's more stable." Ryan smirked, without looking up from his phone. "Yeah, like $100 a month or something. It's nothing." I wanted to laugh in their faces, but I didn't. Instead, I tilted my head and said, "Sure, I'll take care of it." They both smiled, relieved, smug, certain they'd just secured another win. They had no idea what "I'll take care of it" really meant. The next day I went to the bank where my old accounts had been, the ones they drained. Using the documentation, I'd kept the transfer confirmations, the emails from Ryan's laptop, everything. I filed an official fraud dispute. Since the investment account had been solely in my name, and I'd never authorized any transfers, the bank had no choice but to launch an investigation. The representative assured me that if the claims were valid, the funds would be withdrawn from the recipient's accounts immediately to restore the balance. I made sure to time my move perfectly. The same day the bank contacted my parents about the dispute, I went to the dealership that had sold Ryan the Porsche. A friendly conversation with the sales manager, plus the proof I had that the car was purchased with misappropriated funds, meant the dealership was suddenly very interested in cooperating with the bank's inquiry. By Friday, their accounts were frozen, pending the investigation. I didn't even have to be there to see it. I heard about it when Ryan stormed into the cafe during my shift, red-faced and demanding to know what I'd done. I calmly told him customers were waiting and went back to making lattes. That weekend, I moved the last of my things into my new apartment without telling them. The only hint I left behind was an empty room with a single sheet of paper taped to the wall. "You'll want to check your bank account." From what I later heard through a mutual acquaintance, the moment they saw the frozen balances, my dad's face went pale. My mom started calling me immediately, 15 missed calls in an hour, but I didn't answer. Ryan tried to, alternating between insults and demands in his voicemails. I blocked all three of them, but I wasn't done yet. There was one last piece I'd been saving, something that would make sure they understood just how permanent this shift in power was. That last piece came into play a week later once the bank's investigation wrapped up. The funds from my investment account, all $7,942 of it, were fully restored to me. But the fallout for my parents was worse than just losing that money. Because the purchase of Ryan's Porsche had been tied directly to the drained college fund. Money that had been set aside in my name, the bank flagged it for further review. Turns out my grandparents had legally designated those funds as educational use only. By misusing them, my parents had violated the terms of the account. The bank had no choice but to report it, and the dealership was obligated to cooperate. Within days, the Porsche was repossessed, not sold, but taken back. Apparently, the dealership resold it almost immediately. But not before the neighbors saw a tow truck haul the golden child's pride and joy out of the driveway. Ryan didn't leave the house for a week after that, and when he did, he was behind the wheel of my dad's beat-up sedan. The insurance company, now aware of the financial investigation, dropped them entirely. Without coverage, my parents had to pay out of pocket for every vehicle until they could find a new provider. One that, from what I heard, charged them through the roof because of the flagged incident. As for me, I thrived. I paid my tuition in full from the trust, covered my rent in advance for the year, and even started a small savings portfolio in my own name. My cafe job and marketing internship kept extra money flowing in, and my new apartment became a quiet, drama-free zone where I could actually breathe. I never responded to their calls, but about a month later, I got a letter from my mom. It was dripping with self-pity. "You've embarrassed this family. We were just trying to help your brother. You'll regret turning your back on us." I didn't reply. Instead, I filed it away in the same folder where I kept all the proof of what they'd done, just in case they ever tried something again. Word traveled fast in our extended family. Relatives who had once praised my parents started asking uncomfortable questions at gatherings, questions my parents apparently didn't want to answer. My aunt even reached out to me privately, telling me my parents had been a little quieter lately and that Ryan had stopped bragging about his perfect life. The best part? They couldn't touch me anymore. Financially, legally, emotionally, they had no leverage left. They taught me my whole life to expect nothing from them, and now I expected even less. One crisp morning before class, I transferred a final sum from the trust into my savings. Sitting in my car, I thought about everything that had happened. How they'd underestimated me. How they'd assumed I'd always just take it. I smiled to myself, started the engine, and drove off to the life I'd built without them, leaving the golden child and his enablers exactly where they belonged, in the rearview mirror.